Welcome to episode number 49 of the Blitz Take. I am here with NBC LA's Michael Duarte, recapping the wild card game between the Lions and Rams. And it's been um, a fun ride lately with the playoffs, and uh, I'm happy to have you on to recap an interesting Rams and Lions game.
Yeah, Alex, and I'm happy to join you. I know we've tried to connect many times, just haven't been able to work it out with times over the past few months. And I'm excited to talk about this wild card game last on Sunday night, but also the whole weekend, Saturday, Sunday, and we got to talk about your Eagles Monday night and the
Yeah.
way their season ended. Because if we want to talk about the Rams, winning seven out of their last eight games, pushing the Detroit Lions, for all they had left, in my opinion, and we can break it down here in the next few minutes. I thought not necessarily in the first half, but obviously the Rams made some adjustments on defense at halftime. And then if you look at the totality of the game, all four quarters, I thought the Rams might have been the better team. I thought the difference was in the red zone and how the Rams had to settle for field goals and the Lions were able to get touchdowns. But I could make a point the Rams were the better team in that game. Like I said, winning 7 of 8 to end the season, the team nobody wanted to play. And had the Rams, maybe gotten a call on that 3rd and 14 on the Puka Nacua play, whether it was defensive holding, pass interference, late hit on a defenseless receiver, any of those three things could have changed this so that we were talking about, the Rams playing Tampa Bay, a team I think they could have beat as well. And who knows what would have happened, because the way the Eagles looked in that same stretch, those final 7 games of the season, those final 7 weeks, it's just crazy. Two teams going in two totally opposite directions, in my opinion.
Mhm. I was really impressed about the Lions run game, especially David Montgomery. He was unbelievable, as well as Jamil Gibbs. I felt like those two were uh, the leaders of the team that game. And what were your thoughts on the offensive play system they had?
Yeah, and I would just say to your point early, whether it was Montgomery, um, you know, I mean, a lot of guys we could look at, whether it was Montgomery taking the ball, carrying the ball, whether it was um, Gibbs, for example, he looked kind of impressive in that first half too, or what Jared Goff was able to do, finding guys like Sam Laporta, his tight end, who scored a touchdown, Amon-Ra St. Brown, who obviously helped seal the game, and I think he had something extra to prove in this game, not like Jared Goff or Matthew Stafford or Josh Reynolds, another guy who kind of had a revenge game, but I think Puka Nacua making the Pro Bowl over Amon-Ra St. Brown, who had more yards than him and a little bit more of a veteran, I guess, if you want to look at it like that, playing 3 years than just Puka rookie year. I think he had something to prove in that. But the biggest thing to your question, and for diehard football fans who like the game and schemes, the Rams opened the game playing a 4-man defensive front.
Mhm.
And because of that, Gibbs and Montgomery were able to find holes in that line. And even more so, they were unable to, the Rams' defensive 4-man front was unable to put pressure on Jared Goff and get to the quarterback. The game plan going in, as Sean McVay has known for a long time, obviously his 4 years with Jared Goff, was Jared Goff has got a great arm. He's very accurate. He can make all the throws. But if you put pressure on him, if you make him uncomfortable, and this is the case with most quarterbacks, let's just say that. So it's not that, but him in particular, he's not like Patrick Mahomes, where he can create with his feet and keep plays alive, like Lamar Jackson, who can just take off and run with the ball, or Jalen Hurts, as you know well. Jared Goff is not that guy. And so if you put pressure on him, he will make mistakes and he will get scared, I guess, in the
Mhm.
pocket. And what you saw in the second half is more like what the Rams wanted. So the game plan going in was to put pressure on him. But the offensive line for the Detroit Lions, and we got to give some credit to them in that first half. They doubled and tripled team Aaron Donald. They did not let Aaron Donald wreck the game. And because of that, the run game was working well in the first half for the Lions. The run was then setting up the pass, and then the passing game was working well for the first half of the Lions. The Rams went into the locker room and they changed their defensive scheme. Rather than a 4-man defensive front, they went with a 5-man defensive front. So now you're putting 5 guys up on the line to try to put pressure on Jared Goff, to not allow the Lions to double and triple team Aaron Donald, to try to free him up to get some single man coverage. And in my opinion, as you saw in the second half, it worked. You held the line. If I had told you a game that was, what was it, 21-17 at the half, I believe, right? They had 48 points at the half. No, that's bad math. Is it bad math? 38 points? 38 points at the half. I think the over-under was like 51 or something like that, 52. So really, 2 more touchdowns and the over would have hit after, there was 5 touchdowns scored in the first half and a field goal. So to me, if you had told me after that first half and all the offense we saw in the first half that the Rams would be able to hold the Lions to just 3 points in the second half, I probably would have thought you were crazy. I was just thinking, like, there's no way. This is going to be a shootout. This is going to be like kind of like the Lions-Packers score, right? It's going to be like 41-34 or something. But no, it ended up being a defensive game in the second half, and that was simply because the Rams changed their scheme. They put 5 men on the line. They put pressure on Goff. They were able to shut down the run in the second half, and they were able to play more man-on-man on the outside when they were playing more zone in the first half. And they almost got it done. They almost pulled off the upset.
My question is, what did you think the Rams needed to do better to change out the outcome of the game?
Yeah, and that's I can tell you that in 1 word or 2 words, I guess. Red zone. That is the absolute difference in this game, Alex. It is the reason why the Rams are going home sad and booking their tickets for Cancun, and the Lions are going to host the Tampa Bay Buccaneers next weekend for a second home playoff game at Ford Field for the first time in 30 plus years and 32 years. And so, you just said it, kind of what could they have done differently, I guess, in the red zone is what we're looking at. I don't really know how you fix that, I suppose. Better play calling, I guess. But 0 for 3 in the red zone was what the Rams were. They settled for 3 field goals, as we mentioned in the opening of this podcast. The Lions were 3 for 3. So that means the Lions went down in the red zone. They got 21 points out of it. The Rams went down in the same red zone inside the 20. They got 9 points out of it. That's a difference of 12 points with both teams having the exact same opportunities, within 20 yards of the end zone. And the Rams lost by 1. So any of those 3 red zone opportunities converts a touchdown instead of a field goal, and the Rams win by more than 3 points, right? And you can look at them all individually. I thought it was interesting that the very first drive of the game for the Rams, I believe they had 1st and goal from the 6-yard line after a unsportsmanlike conduct penalty, I believe, on the Eagles that moved the ball halfway to the goal line. And then the Rams went pass, incomplete, and then had to settle for the field goal. I was surprised Sean McVay didn't run the ball either on 1st or 2nd down to Kyren Williams, just to see if you could have gotten a little bit closer or what they have done. I think that might have been a mistake to go pass. So you could look at Sean McVay's play calling there and why they settled for 3 on that drive. But then the next 2 drives, they got touchdowns out of it on long passes. I think the Lions secondary is not good. Statistically, they've shown that throughout the season. And I think Matthew Stafford and the Rams took advantage of that a lot in the game. And I think they maybe just needed to exploit it more. But once you got down in the red zone, I would have liked to have seen Sean McVay run the ball to Kyren Williams a little more, maybe get a little bit more creative with the play calls, find ways to get guys open. And I think if any of those field goals, like we just said, settled for was a touchdown instead, it's a different game. Another weird thing, and we'll talk about this because you can pinpoint this. That's the answer to your question overall, why they lost the game, why they're heading home, that specific stat. But let's look at that Rams final drive of the game. There's a little bit over 4 minutes left. They're on 3rd and 4, I believe, from I think like the 34-yard line, something like that, of the Lions. At that point, it would have been a 50-plus yard field goal attempt for Brett Maher, a guy who had literally just come off the couch to rejoin the Rams after he was cut earlier for missing 3 extra points and a field goal against the Steelers earlier in the season. And what Sean McVay had told us throughout the week leading up to this wild card matchup versus the Lions, when we asked about why he got rid of the last quarterback, Lucas Haversick, who missed some kicks at the end of the season, for Brett Maher, and to bring a guy back that you cut earlier in the year, Sean McVay had said that he thought they had put Maher in situations where he had to kick some 48 to 60-yard field goals, and he wasn't very good in that range. And so they thought if they gave him more easy field goal opportunities of like 42 yards or less, he'd be more consistent. So with that in mind, I was surprised when the holding on number 79, Rob Havenstein, took place on 3rd and 4, that Dan Campbell of the Lions, the head coach of the Lions, decided to take the penalty and push them back 10 yards to make it a 3rd and 14. Ultimately, it worked, so we can't argue with the logic. But forcing the Rams into 4th and 4 and to having to kick a 50-something yard field goal with a kicker that just, came off the couch that they had cut earlier, I thought he would have declined the penalty, put him in 4th and 4, and made him kick that field goal. And we don't know what would have happened with that field goal, Alex. Maybe he makes it. Maybe he doesn't make it. I don't know. Maybe they go for it. It's a different situation, but I thought it was a risky move to put the ball back in Matthew Stafford's hands, 3rd and 14. You never know what can happen. Maybe they decide to go 2-down territory. Maybe they decide to throw a 10-yard pass, make it 4th and 4 again, and then go for it. I don't know. But that decision by Dan Campbell to take the penalty, push him back 10 yards rather than decline it and make it 4th down, I thought was a huge difference in the game, because ultimately the Rams don't get that call on the Puka Nacua pass attempt I just mentioned, which I thought was either defensive holding, pass interference, or a late hit penalty. They don't get that call, and they punt. And maybe if Dan Campbell doesn't take the penalty and push him back 10 yards, we're talking about a whole different outcome right now.
So do you see the Rams making any changes coaching wise?
I don't think so. Now they just lost. Let me look up the name real quick for you, because I don't want to make a mistake here. But they just lost. Hold on. They just lost a defensive coach who has been with the team a long time. Eric Henderson. He just left the Rams. He's been with the Rams a long time. He's a great assistant coach for them. Been a great part of what the Rams have been able to do on defense over the years, especially this year, taking a very, very young, inexperienced defense with rookies all over the field and making them a good defense, in my opinion, an above average defense here the second half of the football season. But Eric Henderson leaving to go to the USC to be the co-defensive coordinator and the defensive line coach, joining up with Anthony Lynn's son, who was UCLA's defensive coordinator. He's now the USC co-defensive coordinator with Eric Henderson. That's the only place I see you're moving. Now, there's rumors that Raheem Morris is going to have some head coaching interviews out there. The Falcons, a team that he was the interim head coach of previously, is one team I'm hearing wants to interview Raheem Morris. I haven't necessarily seen a head coaching situation that I think Raheem Morris would be good for, or that he's going to get. So depending on if Raheem Morris gets a head coaching job, the Rams could be looking for a new defensive coordinator. Brandon Staley just got fired from the Chargers. I don't think anyone wants to touch him with another job right now. So it's possible he could come back if Raheem Morris leaves. those are two coaches you could look at. But right now, they're going to need to replace Eric Henderson. That after leaving to USC, it could be a big loss for the Rams. But Sean McVay's done a good job of finding coaches to replace some roles. So to your point, that's the only changes I think that are happening on the coaching side. Sean McVay has said already he's coming back next year. No more off-season speculation of if he's going to retire, if he's going to go to the broadcast booth. He's back next year. One thing that stood out for me in the post-game comments that he made yesterday at Ford Field was that he said this team, this current team, the 2023 Los Angeles Rams, like gave him his desire back, gave him his love for the game back. He's admitted in multiple interviews that in 2022, following their Super Bowl run, to go 5-12 and have everything go wrong and have the wheels come off and have to lose play calling duties in the middle of the season and lose his quarterback and his Triple Crown receiver and Cooper Kupp and Aaron Donald and all this, it wore on him. He got angry. He was not fun to be around. He was mean, I heard, to people. He was not willing to hear other opinions from staff, and he had a miserable season in which he was ready to retire and head to the broadcast booth after. He decided to think about it. He decided to change his ways, to change his approach, to be more open to criticism from everybody. And he's been a lot nicer this year, according to the players, a lot more open to hearing suggestions and comments and how the team can get better. And look, they defied the odds. Nobody had them sniffing the playoffs before the season. Everybody had the Rams winning around 6 games or less, maybe being a top 5 team. I have people here in Los Angeles who told me they were only going to win 3 games and they should tank for Caleb Williams. Well, not only did they not do any of that, they exceeded all those expectations. They finished 10-7. They finished second in the NFC or the NFC West, where they were predicted to be last in that division. And they get a first round playoff game that they almost win, in my opinion, and we're probably the better team in, which is crazy to think because the Cowboys got knocked off, the Eagles got knocked off, who went to the Super Bowl and won the NFC last year. So outside of the 49ers, you could have made a case that, one of those things changes in that game and that final drive for the Rams yesterday, or any of those red zone trips. We could be looking at, realistically, a Niners-Rams NFC championship again for the second time in 3 years. And I think people would give the Rams a fighting chance in that game just because it's a division opponent. You know them very well. They went up and beat them in Week 18. I know a lot of guys didn't play, but that would have been a really fun NFC championship to see. So, that's what happened. But to your overall point, because that they had a really good year this year, I think they're going to keep things together. I don't think you're going to see a lot of changes from this year to next year. I think you have guys like Kyron Williams at running back, Puka Nacua at wide receiver, Kobe Durant on defense. These are rookies that were awesome this year. Couple of them Pro Bowlers, couple of them, breaking records. Those guys are all under team-friendly rookie contracts for the next 3 to 4 years. You can build around these guys. You can build around Aaron Donald. You can build around Cooper Kupp and Puka, as I mentioned. The offensive line stayed healthy this year. There's now more depth there than there's ever been before. Matthew Stafford, he's under contract for the next 2 years, but that cap hit is like $50 million. So I wouldn't be surprised, Alex, and I know you're going to DM me when it happens, but I wouldn't be surprised if they restructure his contract to bring that cap hit number down for next season. Give him a signing bonus or some money somewhere else to make him happy. But that could free up some cap space. So now you can go out and get another defensive pass rusher to go alongside Aaron Donald, like they had with Von Miller in the Super Bowl year, to really put pressure on teams to say, what do you want to do? You want to double or triple team Aaron Donald? Because now we got another guy who can get to the quarterback, and you can't do that anymore. And then if you're going to not double Aaron Donald, you're going to put a guy on each, then Aaron Donald can get to you. So that's one area of need I think the Rams need. I think they need another pass rusher to help free up Aaron Donald next season. And they traded away one, so it's weird to say after they traded away Jalen Ramsey in the offseason to the Miami Dolphins, but I think they need one more shutdown corner. And if there's one that's potentially available, in the free agency market or via trade, the Rams might be interested in bringing in another shutdown corner on defense to go with this team. And I think those are two pieces that if you add those two pieces, if you add a better field goal kicker as well, and that's not a lot if we're being honest, right?
Yeah.
And make sure you can stay healthy next year. This team suddenly goes from a wild card team to potentially a Super Bowl contender.
Hmm. I know we talked about the Lions and Rams. I just wanted to touch on my Eagles, and I know they broke Philadelphia as a whole, and I'm like every time I have a another reporter like you, Michael, um, to have perspective on like what your thoughts are on the like everything that came up in the game yesterday, and what are your expectations on what this Eagles future holds?
Yeah, I want to talk about the Eagles, Alex. I have been waiting for this for since you talked to me yesterday and said you wanted to talk about them. I honestly did not see. I'm not surprised this happened, Alex, that the
Hmm.
Eagles lost in such a bad fashion to the Tampa Bay Bucks. I'm not surprised now that it's happened, but I didn't think it was going to happen. I didn't think it was going to
Hmm.
happen 3 days ago. I didn't think it was going to happen 3 weeks ago. I didn't even think it was going to happen 2 weeks ago. And I guess I shouldn't be surprised, but this is a team in the Eagles that beat the beat the brakes off Tampa Bay in Tampa Bay earlier in the season. And it's not like injuries have disrailed this Eagles team or Tampa Bay added pieces and got better. This is also a team in the Eagles that beat the Rams and beat the Dolphins and beat the Chiefs and beat Buffalo and the
Hmm.
Cowboys when they started off 10-1. And to see what's happened since then, talking about the losses to Seattle, Arizona, the New York Giants, and now, let's face it, a very lopsided blowout loss to Tampa Bay. I mean, those receivers were blowing through the Philadelphia secondary like they were TSA pre. Uh, Nobody on Philadelphia could tackle. That did not
Hmm.
look like the team that I saw live with my eyes in the Super Bowl in Arizona just like a year ago almost. It didn't look like the same team, but yet it's
Hmm.
ultimately pretty close to the same players, the same personnel, the same coaches. So I don't know the answer, Alex. You're closer to the team than I am. I really want to know. What I can say is it's not just these last 7 weeks. I know everybody wants to point to the last 7 weeks, but that win over Buffalo, that felt like a game they were probably going to lose. The win over Kansas City was very close. I would say ever since that bye week in week 10, and I think that kind of lines up with right around when they made a defensive coaching move and they let Matt Patricia kind of take over the defensive play calling abilities. Ever since then, it was like the house of cards was starting to crumble. You know
Hmm.
what I mean? Like they
Yeah.
were winning those next two games, but they weren't winning in convincing fashion. It looked like they were kind of getting lucky and holding on for those victories. And then all of a sudden, you pulled it apart and the whole house of collapses card when they got blown out to the 49ers. And I don't know if that messed with their confidence or what, but this did not look like the same team. They didn't look like they were on the same page. They didn't look like they were communicating on the offensive line. There was mistakes, penalties that normally this team didn't have, especially last year. Jalen Hurts didn't look the same player that he was. I didn't see him running with the ball a lot. I didn't see him just kind of picking apart defenses like they were string cheese the way he did last season. And then defensively, that's to me where I saw the biggest drop off. That Eagles defense, ever since that switch to Matt Patricia, it was like it wasn't cohesive. They weren't a team.
Hmm.
Even just looking at tonight, right, where they were missing all these tackles, and it's like, who is this team? Like it looked like a bunch of individual players trying to make the play rather than a team concept where you play on a string and you just got to get your hands on a guy and wait for your teammate to come complete a tackle. They didn't have the right angles. It did not. It. I'm telling you, Alex, and I want to hear what you say now. I'll shut up and let you talk. But this did not look like the same team from the first half of the season, and it looked nothing like the team from the Super Bowl run last season.
Hmm.
And the way they went out is embarrassing, in my opinion, if you're an Eagles fan, especially I had them as my Super Bowl favorite to win the whole thing this year, Alex. And when they were
Hmm.
10-1, I was like, I'm looking great. I had
Yeah.
them, I had them going back to the Super Bowl, beating the Niners in the NFC Championship again, and either beating the Chiefs in the Super Bowl or the Ravens. And I don't know. I don't know. I see a lot of memes on the internet with Nick Sirianni when they beat the Chiefs and him being very arrogant and cocky to the Chiefs fans.
Hmm.
I saw some of the same things when they played teams earlier. I don't know if it starts with Nick Sirianni and he's got to go, and you got to get a new head coach in there, new assistant coaches, and a new culture, and try to bring the team back because obviously they have the talent to do it.
Hmm.
But it was embarrassing the way they went out. It didn't seem like they were playing together. They just didn't look like a team these last 7 weeks. So now I'm going to shut up and let you tell me what you saw.
Um, Starting off with the game last night, I just felt like the whole defensive system just fell asleep and just stopped working like human's mind. um, and I just feel like the whole team just wasn't there and didn't have the capability of everything that they had in the Super Bowl one last year. And I don't know what happened with Jalen Hurts, but he definitely did not look himself, especially last night's game. I know that AJ Brown was missing, but he could have had done a little better than what he had. And um, DeAndre Swift definitely didn't look himself. Uh, I'm not sure how many yards total he had, but it looked like the Tampa Bay uh, coverage was absolutely phenomenal, and it was hard to get open slots for the Eagles' offensive system to get going, and that's that's exactly how they lost the game with bad intentions, with offensive uh, play system and everything that had to do with the defense, especially the secondaries. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and I just feel like this team is going to have to rebuild, starting with the defense side of things, and it's all going to start this offseason. And I'm really anxious to see what happens and who who they let go of, and uh, I just can't wait until I see that Adam Schefter tweet.
That Sirianni is gone. Is that what you're thinking?
uh, yeah, I mean, I'm not confident that it's going to be him that is on the hot seat. I think it's more of the defensive uh, coordinators,
Yeah, Desi
but
and Desai and
yeah.
Matt Patricia. So do you think, honestly, can we look at Jonathan Gannon departing last after the Super Bowl to go to the Arizona Cardinals to take over that head coaching job?
Hmm.
Can we look at that as maybe what it's weird for a team that started 10-1, but
Hmm.
even in those games, they didn't look like the defense was necessarily, what it was last year. So can we look at that as maybe being the big thing that we talked about the house of cards, but you pulled it and then you're on shaky grounds with no Gannon and you got two different coordinators and then you're always switching back and forth during the season. Was that a big loss for this team? Do you think that's the reason why they're going home uh, and not
Um,
playing in Detroit next week?
I feel like everyone is making excuses of Brian Johnson and the way he's been uh, just been himself, and I just feel like it's either going to be him on the hot seat or Desire. But uh, I'm just as of now, it's up in the air, and to be honest, I don't even know if if Harry Roseman is going to let go of any one of them, but I know for a fact that uh, something will happen in the next month or two, or any timetable as that. But I'm just, I just feel like really heartbroken with what how it closed out, especially with Jason Kelsey making his last go around with the Eagles, and it's just really hard to comprehend of what he went through, and I wish that they were still alive and were headed to Detroit.
Would you rather them lose in the first round like this, especially after finishing the second half of the season the way they did? Or would you rather them lose to the Lions next week or the 49ers in the NFC Championship game? Would you, like, knowing this team is flawed and not as good as last year, and
Mm-hmm.
there's dysfunction and a lot of stuff we can say, whatever the reason is going on with the team, would you rather just end it now, or maybe Sirianni can get fired and you can kind of get some new energy and blood and faces in there? Or would you rather them one on Monday night and then, maybe lost in Detroit, or beat Detroit and then lost to the 49ers? Like, what would, if that was the outcome I told you was
Mm-hmm.
going to happen, what would you rather see?
I mean, sitting here right now and knowing that they lost that game in Tampa Bay, yeah, I think that was the right move. I'm not sure if they lost. Um, what's the word? Like, put themselves as losing and actually giving up, or actually trying their best. But it, just watching the whole game yesterday, um, felt like they just gave up,
I
and
agree with you. Yeah. It looked like a team that gave up. It looked
they,
like a team that gave up. I mean, you're talking about, and this is no
yeah.
disrespect to Baker Mayfield and Tampa Bay. They scored 9 points, not a touchdown, against the Carolina Panthers, the worst team in the NFL the week before, when they had to win,
Hmm.
go to the postseason and win the NFC South. They scored 9 points against the worst team in the NFL, and yet the Eagles let them score 32 points.
Hmm.
Was it more than 32? What was it? It was 32, right?
I think so.
I mean, that tells me like you're giving up. I think
Hmm.
I think the Lions are going to beat them badly, and we're going to see exactly what Tampa Bay is next week. Yeah, so I agree with you. I think they gave up, and I feel
Yeah.
bad for Jason Kelsey because he deserved better from his
Hmm.
team, from his teammates, from his coaches. In what might be his final game ever, or
Hmm.
with the Eagles, like you mentioned.
Before we wrap up, I just wanted to ask you one last question. Um, Actually, it's kind of two questions, but do you see Nick Sirianni getting fired and having a rebuild in the Eagles for this for next season? And what do you think that they can be a Super Bowl contender once again next season with a healthy AJ Brown and everyone else without Jason Kelsey?
I will say this. Um, how do I answer this? I'm trying to. I can answer your question directly, or I can kind of answer it in a more broader NFL way. So first and foremost, if I'm if I'm Jeffrey Lurie, I think I have to fire Nick Sirianni.
Mm-hmm.
At the very least, I have to hire a team to find out what went wrong with this Eagles team, right? And whether
Yeah.
or not it starts with Nick Sirianni. But to me, it has to start with the head coach, right?
Yeah.
We can point to the defensive coaches like we just said, but at the end of the day, it's the head coach that's making the decisions on who's calling the defensive plays, who's going to do what. So if we are going to say it's, the defensive coach's faults and it's them who need to go, well, what about the guy that hired those guys when Jonathan Gannon left and let them call the plays and let all this unravel the way it did? Especially when you kind of hit the nail on the head. You have the talent that you have. You have AJ Brown, you have Devonta Smith, you have Goddard, you have a great offensive line still, you have a great defensive line.
Mm-hmm.
You were just in the Super Bowl. You were maybe one defensive pass interference call away on Juju Smith-Schuster from winning the freaking Super Bowl. So to me, you have to look at it, if you're Jeffrey Lurie, like, we still have the window's still open. We still have a chance. What went wrong? If it starts with Nick Sirianni, if he's the head of the snake, we need to get him out and we need to bring somebody in. I didn't like the way Nick Sirianni acted after they beat the Chiefs. I didn't like the way he acted, some of the time throughout this season. I know he's a Philly guy and they all love him and it was great last year, but maybe sometimes those antics don't end up playing well. But it felt like he lost the team in the second half of the year after the bye week. And maybe it started with the defense, but definitely it looks like both sides of the ball gave up. And yeah, AJ Brown would have helped, but look, AJ Brown was there prior to that Giants game in week 18, which they lost. You could see this coming a mile away. Like the train had fallen off the tracks for the Eagles for whatever reason here the last 8 weeks. So you could see this coming a mile away. But that Tampa Bay team that beat them badly tonight, scoring 32 points, is not a very good team. They were lucky to win the division at 9-8. You know what I mean? If we didn't have divisions, they would not even be in the playoffs.
Yeah.
The Seahawks would have got in over them. There were other teams who would have got in over the Tampa Bay Bucks. So to lose to that team, I don't know if it's as bad as what happened to the Cowboys, and I think the Cowboys have to get rid of Mike McCarthy as well. I say that because there's a lot of great head coaches out there that can come in and fix this Eagles team and get them right back where they were. And I will kind of end this with something that's bigger in the NFL. Most of the time, when you have a very good quarterback on a team-friendly or a rookie deal, and you're able to spread the money around to other positions and both sides of the ball, defense, offense, the line, receivers, whatever it may be, that is when you have tremendous success. Look at what the Cincinnati Bengals have been able to do prior to this season with Joe Burrow on a rookie deal. Look what the Eagles were able to do with Jalen Hurts on his rookie deal. Look what the Seattle Seahawks were able to do with Russell Wilson winning a Super Bowl on his rookie deal. And what happened, Alex, when they paid Russell Wilson and made him the highest paid player in the league? They never sniffed the Super Bowl again. And slowly but surely, you had to make tough decisions and let guys go because there was too much money going to one position. Unfortunately, that's just the way the league is. The quarterback makes the most money more than anybody else. But when that happens, as you saw with the Rams, you have to pay the piper. And when Matthew Stafford's under contract for $50 million and Aaron Donald's the most expensive player in the league on defense and Cooper Kupp gets a raise and all these guys get raises for winning the Super Bowl, other positions have to go. And so in the case of the Rams, they lost 7 starters last year because they couldn't afford them anymore. Taylor Rapp, Nick Scott, Bobby Wagner, Leonard Floyd, Greg Gaines, Jalen Ramsey, all gone, packing. And you had to bring in rookies and undrafted free agents because you just didn't have the money. And that's where holes come into the other parts of the ball and you get exposed by other teams. So with that said, the Bengals paid Joe Burrow and I know he was hurt, but they didn't get back to the postseason this year. And it's only going to get worse for them because now you're going to have Jamar Chase that you're going to have to pay and T. Higgins, and you're not going to be able to pay everybody. It's just the reality of the NFL with the current salary cap situation as it is. So the Eagles made a decision after getting to the Super Bowl last year. They gave Jalen Hurts a massive extension, I believe $255 million, making him one of the highest paid players in the league. That's going to come back to bite you. So what I talk about with the Eagles, that window to win, it's only going to keep getting smaller and smaller and smaller because eventually you're going to have to decide who to pay. And when you're giving your quarterback $51 million, You're not going to be able to pay like a Devonta Smith when his contract's up and he becomes a free agent. Jason Kelsey, if he comes back, like, he's a Pro Bowler, he's a future Hall of
Yeah.
Famer. You're going to have to pay him what he's worth, and you just don't have the money to pay it. So what's going to end up happening is if the Eagles don't capitalize in the next year or two, you're going to have to reset the whole thing because you're going to not be able to pay everybody and you're going to lose a lot of guys, and you're going to be in a situation where teams like Tampa Bay is kind of the last 2 years, where the Rams have been the last 2 years, where you're going to need to kind of rebuild on the fly around some guys because you got to let a lot of guys, a lot of Pro Bowlers, a lot of good talent go because you can't pay everybody.
Mm-hmm. Uh, Before we go, I just wanted to get your prediction for the rest of the NFL playoffs.
Yeah,
Uh,
great question.
who do you like next week
So
between Kansas City and Buffalo?
let's start with you. I want to know who's going to represent the NFC in the Super Bowl. Who's your pick?
Um, so it's Green Bay and
Green Bay, San Francisco 49ers, Detroit Lions, Tampa Bay. Which of those four is going to the Super Bowl? Your pick.
I'll pick the 49ers.
Okay. And in the AFC, you got Houston, Kansas City, Buffalo, and Baltimore Ravens. Who you think's going to represent the AFC?
I'll do Ravens.
Okay. So you got San Francisco Ravens 2013 rematch, I think it was.
Yeah,
Who do you got winning the Super Bowl?
the 49ers.
Okay. Okay. I like that pick. I like all that. I think you're right there. I'm gonna readjust now. Obviously, before the season began, I said Eagles Chiefs rematch. Eagles win it this time. I'm very way off on that with the Eagles, but we'll see. Look, I look at the matchups because for me, week in, week out, it's always about matchups. So I think the Packers upsetting the Cowboys just breaks perfectly for the 49ers.
Mm-hmm.
I think the 49ers can beat the Packers very easily. I think that defense is just too much for Green Bay. And then my guess is Detroit should take care of Tampa Bay. So Detroit having to go to San Francisco. I can't believe it because I just didn't think Brock Purdy was the real deal. And I think the Ravens and some other teams this year proved he might not be,
Mm-hmm.
but he just has to be a game manager. He just has to not turn the ball over and make mistakes and give it to the guys that are talented on that team, like Deebo Samuel, Christian McCaffrey. Like he's got the pieces around him. He's got the best offensive line with Trent Williams. The defense is insane with Bosa, and now you got Chase Young. Like they're good at every position. So to me, the Niners they're going back to the Super Bowl. If they had to play the Rams or had to play the Cowboys, I think it might have gone a little different. Who knows?
Mm-hmm.
But they're the clear-cut favorite in the NFC. It's interesting in the AFC because things didn't break the way they could have for the Chiefs had, let's say, Pittsburgh upset Buffalo. Maybe if they had played that game in the blizzard on Sunday morning like they were supposed to, maybe it's just a running game, in which case maybe you like the Pittsburgh Steelers and Najee Harris. You think maybe they can pull it off. So that didn't happen, of course. And so now you have Kansas City going to Buffalo and
Mm-hmm.
having to play there for the first time in the playoffs, where I think all the other matchups were in Kansas City. But you know what? Can't believe I'm going to say this, but it just seems like every year the Buffalo Bills they let us down. They're not the real deal. I believe they lost to the Bengals last year at home. So I'm going to say the Chiefs upset Buffalo at Buffalo next week. I think Baltimore takes care of the Texans very easily. And then you have Kansas City going to Baltimore. And I don't know what happens. I think Baltimore probably beats them, but I don't want to give the champs, an out yet. Their defense is better this year, I think, than they were last year. So I think Kansas City has a shot. So just to be different than your pick, I'll say, even though I do think probably you're right, but I'll say San Francisco, Kansas City in the Super Bowl, a rematch from a few years ago. And yeah, this time then 49ers probably take it.
pretty solid pick. I like that pick.
I
I
will
think
say this though, if you're right and it's Baltimore, San Francisco, I'll go
yeah,
Baltimore if that's the matchup. I'll go Baltimore to win it.
yeah. Um, it should be a fun rest of the ride in the playoffs for the NFL. And thank you for taking the time to come on and recap everything Rams playoff football related. And hope to have you back on soon.
You got it. I look forward to that. Maybe we'll be talking Sixers playoffs next time.
Yeah. So thanks again, and can't wait to see what happens.
Yeah, you're welcome.